Shalom and welcome to TBN Israel, the podcast. I'm here with the one and only Shoshani. How are you doing?
You're also the one and only Yair.
Thanks, it's good to be
We're all
too.
first here.
Definitely. And today we're going to discuss the question, is Israel going to take back its north? So to set the stage for all of
let's
this.
say, how is Israel going to take back in the north?
And when?
We're taking it back.
And when?
How are we going to take it back?
Yeah, definitely. So options are not so many, but we're going to discuss them.
Yeah.
And basically to set the stage, since this war began on October 8th, and I'm talking about the war between Israel and Hezbollah on the northern front, in Lebanon, in Syria, and other, nice countries in that region include Iraq, that have also Iranian militias launching attacks at us. 60,000 or even more Israelis were dislocated from their houses and live in hotels.
Displaced, yeah.
Yeah, and that includes children, people that cannot go to work, and all of them are basically on standby, waiting to return to their houses on the northern communities that you've just recently visited.
Yeah, we just spent a couple of days up north, and you said it exactly correctly. Northern Israel is, for the most part, and this is on the areas close to the border, much of the population centers have been evacuated to places a little farther away from the border. And for weeks now, the conversation has been, how are we going to end this story with Hezbollah?
And is there a plan for the government to enable these Israelis to return to their houses? I mean, they are frustrated. We've been talking to many displaced Israelis in the past 11 months, and they are frustrated because there is no end goal. There is no deadline. There is no, hold on for another 6 months, then we will return to your houses. Or stay here for good, forget about the north. There is no this and no that.
Look, let's look at it from our own age group perspective. There are countless families right now in northern Israel whose kids are going in for the second time into a school system outside of their place of residence because they can't return to their homes.
Yeah.
They can't return to Kiryat Shmona, they can't return to Metula, they can't return to countless other small communities up north. And the big question, and this is what we're going to try to break down today, is where is this going? Because, and to set the stage to this isn't the first time this has happened. It's the first time it's happened to this degree and for this long of a period of time.
Yeah,
but Hezbollah and other terrorist groups from northern to Israel have for decades threatened the communities of northern Israel. And for many, many years, going all the way back to before back to the 60s and 70s, the Hezbollah and its predecessors have used rockets and the threat of terrorism to try to deter Israelis from living close to the border. Most of the time, the population there has been very resilient and persistent in staying.
Yeah, definitely.
And the army has been strong enough and swift enough to prevent it. This time around, we evacuated a huge number of people. We were over 100,000 at a certain point. Now I think it's somewhere down to 60. 60,000 families thousands of families who've left their homes without a date of return.
Yeah.
And like you said, frustration runs deep. I don't want to say people have lost hope, but there is no end in sight.
That's a problem.
Yeah.
You need to have a vision in order to keep living, to plan ahead, to decide if you're changing your careers, if you want to, sell your house there and move to a different place, even though the market is not so good in buying houses in the northern Israel now. Yeah, and let's talk about a few issues. So since this war started, everybody is focusing on the Gaza Strip. But in reality, every day there have been rockets that have been fired from Lebanon by Hezbollah terrorists towards Israeli communities on the Israeli side of the border.
But let me challenge that statement.
Yeah.
After the first couple of weeks of the war, everyone was focusing on Hamas. Because in the beginning of the war, you were sent to northern Israel, as were multiple members of my family. Because the expectation was, and our assumption was, including myself, that we're
a combined attack.
Exactly. My unit belongs in Judea and Samaria. The assumption was that the war in Gaza was just the precursor to the attack from Hezbollah. Because Hezbollah was and is and will continue to be a much more significant threat to the safety of Israel, definitely when you look at the numbers of it and their accuracy of their weapons compared to Hamas. Hamas never was an existential threat, even though 1,400 dead is a huge death toll, which is what we've suffered, and then plus, of course, the soldiers who've died in the Gaza Strip. But Hezbollah was always the big threat. And we were all expecting Hezbollah to attack, and they never did. And that's topic for...
That's another podcast.
A different podcast of conspiracy theory, understanding why they didn't attack.
Definitely.
Very complex, and we've mentioned it before. But we always were expecting them, and what's sad and problematic and stressful is the fact that even today, almost a year into the war, we're getting very close to that, the threat of Hezbollah hasn't diminished much. And the threat of Iran getting a foothold in Lebanon hasn't diminished much. And I think one of the important statements here is when we were talking about this prepping for the content, is that the Iranians it's not just that they're sending proxies to fight against Israel. They're trying to set up the infrastructure of a country that's able to wage war against Israel on our northern border.
Yes, definitely. And we see that Iran is carrying better, more targeted, deeper attacks against Israel.
Yeah.
We had a drone that hit a building in Nahariya, which is an Israeli northern city. It's basically the biggest Israeli city in the northern area, on the shore of Israel on the Mediterranean. And as well, they're targeting military installations, sometimes successfully, sometimes less successfully, but the range is increasing. So we see that they're using precise weapons, better missiles, and where do they get all these missiles from? From Iran. So Iran is either transporting these missiles, and we've seen reports about Iran using the Beirut International Airport to stockpile these weapons.
Yes.
Convoys from Iran through Syria that reach Lebanon, and unofficial reports claim that Israel attacks these convoys all the time. And a next step of operations, and this supports what you said, that they are trying to build a state of terror within Lebanon to attack us, is the fact that they are using facilities for development and research and stuff like that to build and create more weapons within Syria at that particular incident, in order to create their own rockets, their own weapons, so they don't need to spend these efforts in sending these long convoys to transport these weapons into Lebanon. So they want to manufacture the weapons close by.
Let me elaborate a bit on what you said, because I think the story is very important here. The Hezbollah forces are fed directly by the Iranians, and it's money, training, equipment, all of that together. And then the Iranians are trying to give them also knowledge that goes with the training. So they send experts over, and the Iranians do have experts. They're a country that's well established in warfare, in guerrilla tactics, in the manufacturing of weaponry, in reverse engineering weapons created by other countries.
Yeah, they now sell weapons also to Russia and to other countries in this in the world.
Exactly. And then what they've been doing, and this didn't start on October 7th, this has been going on for years and years, they utilized the destabilization of Iraq with the toppling of Saddam Hussein's government. It's been over 20 years at this point. They've used that destabilization to shuttle weapons, equipment, and people through the desert directly into then Syria, and then ultimately also into Lebanon. They've also been doing the same thing in northern Israel, trying through the Jordanian border, or from Syria to Jordan to Israel.
And they've been practiced. I mean, they've been fighting with these weapons, with the support of the Iranians, against ISIS.
So that's Hezbollah.
Exactly.
So I was saying, so the Iranians have methodically been bringing in weaponry, and they've been creating transport channels where they can drive trucks through the desert. Israel, before this war, was fighting what our government calls the Mabam. In Hebrew, the
war between the wars.
The war between the war, or the limited conflict between the wars.
Exactly.
And in that conflict, and this is for years now, we were bombing convoys of Iranian trucks in the Syrian desert. So the Iranians utilized, or they capitalized on Syria being destabilized. They were capitalizing on Iraq being destabilized, capitalizing on the millions of refugees that were channeling through the Middle East between Iraq and the West, and between Syria and the West,
Turkey,
and just using that destabilization to move a ton of equipment in and out. And the Israeli Air Force specifically, and Israeli intelligence, and Israeli proxies, which is also worth saying, in other countries, have been fighting and pushing back the Iranian attempt to build an infrastructure inside Lebanon. And that brings us really to where we are today, which is we've been fighting. It sort of like sounds, it requires explaining. Fighting to keep them a terrorist organization and not a country-run army.
Listen, and they are already the largest terrorist organization in the world, the most funded terrorist organization in the world, and soon because they're getting involved in the politics in Lebanon, soon they'll have also majority in the parliament if they will not stop.
And those are the staples of a country. I mean, what defines what a government?
Finances, military.
Exactly, political power. So they run for elections. They have control over the land, so military control, governance, policing, and all that kind of stuff. And always the definition of a government is that a government has a monopoly over violence, and that's Hezbollah. Definitely. Hezbollah doesn't fear the Lebanese army. The Lebanese army fears Hezbollah.
We see that all the time.
Yeah, constantly.
Yeah, definitely. And more than that, Lebanon is in an economic crisis for many years now. And if you're in an economic crisis, the only thing that can generate jobs, income, and stream up the economy is a military conflict that can pay the jobs for the people. And on the other hand, patrons like Iran and black markets, including drugs that Hezbollah is really good in, selling drugs to even America and other places around the world to finance their operations. So,
is it Hezbollah? I think it's the Hezbollah in cooperation with the Syrian government. Because the Syrian government, if I remember...
Syrian also, they're good with selling these drugs, the one specific drugs, that Hamas terrorists used in order to become more crazy. It's kind of like
amphetamines.
Like cocaine, but for poor people or something like that last longer and give you courage and make you do inhumane stuff.
It's amphetamine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because that was a story back in the day, this is a side note, where the Jordanian Air Force was bombing smugglers coming in from Syria. It was a Captagon. Thank you, Tomer, our producer. Captagon was the name of the drug.
Good memory, Mati.
Now I remember. It wasn't me. Tomer, our producer, writes in the background. Yeah. Captagon was the name of the drug. But so the Syrians were using this, selling it into Gulf states so they could, as a drug for there, to finance their own government. And Hezbollah did the same thing. I think going back quite a ways back, they were also selling... maybe I'm mixing up the stories.
No, I think Hezbollah has their own drug dealing industry, and Syria went into this industry because it's profitable.
They were selling opiates and marijuana. I think they were selling for a while. Anyway, side note, back to the story. So what's really happening here, and the reason, and I think many people would ask this question, haven't we been talking about Hezbollah for too long? We didn't act. It's never
strong enough.
Haven't we been discussing, even on this podcast, again and again and again, the question of
when are we going to war? Where will be an invasion? What's up with this?
And it seems like an odd question. Like, isn't the Israeli army strong enough to break Hezbollah? Shouldn't the Israeli Air Force be able to take over? And what's really happening here, and this is the fundamental problem, is it's not Israel versus Hezbollah. It's Israel versus the financial might of the Iranians and the Hezbollah, trying to build the stronghold of a modernized army or modernized terrorist organization within Lebanon.
Well, they saw Hamas and the Gaza Strip as an example of a terror country, a small terror country, which is what the Gaza Strip is. Yeah. Everything, the civilian infrastructure, the military installations, the education system, all is controlled by Hamas, which is a terrorist organization. So this is an example of what they want to achieve in Lebanon, so that they will have also the government, the economy, the people, and everybody together. And what they're doing now, successfully, is holding the people of Lebanon as human shields. So they say, if Israel attacks, the people of Lebanon will suffer, which is always the case, because they're terrorists and they don't care about their own people and lives, as we do.
I think this is a good opportunity, Yair, to compliment you on the shirt you're wearing. If people are wondering where they can get such a handsome shirt, like the one Yair is wearing.
Why are you not wearing one, Mati?
Mine is in the laundry. We're selling on on the bottom of our YouTube channel. You can find the links to our online store. Mm-hmm. And the online store has this product, Yair's shirt, and many other products. If you go online and look at that store, you can find bottles and cups and shirts and
stickers. Basically, this is another way of supporting what we do. We're trying to be creative and finding ways to bring you better content to keep this operation going. So, if you want to help us, also by sharing the truth, so you can let people know where to look for content.
Start a conversation
with a shirt, and also support us directly. So this is another way.
Yeah, and we've discussed this. I'll say this to the camera. If people have ideas of things we're not selling, we'd like to hear from you. So make sure to drop a note and say, hey, we'd love this idea. Someone else is doing this. And we'll try to follow up with that idea.
Definitely. Well, I think...
Back to the topic.
Hezbollah. Definitely. So let's talk about, I think, the preemptive strike. Because, so we've seen an increase in the hostilities between Hezbollah and Israel. And I would say that it went to a totally new level when Israel launched a massive preemptive strike against Hezbollah targets, installations, rocket launchers that were about to fire towards Israel only a few weeks ago. So what changed since then?
Not much. And I think that's part of the big problem we have. As you say, Israel, our Air Force struck heavily, Air Force and some special forces struck heavily inside Lebanon at a lot of Hezbollah positions. We penetrated deep into their organization on an intelligence level and hid a lot of the stockpiles that they thought were hidden and secretive and all that stuff that we covered in a previous podcast.
Yeah.
But the expectation was at the time, one, we had to respond because they were about to attack.
Yeah, definitely.
But two, I think there was a underlying expectation in the Israeli public and in general of this sort of being a deterrence for Hezbollah. And the opposite has happened.
Yeah.
Hezbollah were deterred for a while, and they also made public statements saying, no, we come in peace. We come in peace. Everything's fine. No need to continue with this fight.
We hit you, you hit us. It's okay now.
Let's leave it at that.
Yeah, definitely.
There was a bunch of backpedaling of let's just leave things as they are. But in the same time, Hezbollah, and again, it's incremental. It's not 0 to 100. It's incrementally speaking.
Incremental. I like this word. This is my word for today.
The word for today is incremental.
Explain a little bit afterwards.
Anyway, so the change has been very small. Bit by bit, Hezbollah is a little emboldened. Instead of just firing anti-tank missiles at military positions in northern Israel, now it's a drone that's going into a civilian community a little farther south than the previous one. And the shelling just a little bit more. And the mortars just a little bit more. Yeah. And slowly they're raising the heat on the conflict up north.
And we see that now the difference is that the civilian communities are refusing to evacuate.
Yeah.
So they say, we want the government to protect us. We don't want to move further south in this conflict. So we see that in Katzrin, for once. This is a community that is now under fire in the Golan Heights, but the people and the residents do not want to evacuate. So this is like a new
I think it's understandable at this point.
Yeah, but definitely if you see what happened to other communities that they thought that they would return sooner, and they are still living in hotels.
Yeah, this is, when you boil human behavior down, people are logical creatures in certain patterns. And the army looks at, or the IDF, and I think most armies, if I don't have to sustain casualties, and if I don't have to protect a large civilian population that's threatened, I'd rather not. But the problem is when you don't do that, which is what happened in northern Israel, where we allowed communities to evacuate, now that area becomes the buffer zone between you and your enemy. Exactly. And you can never go back. Now your borderline is several kilometers or several miles away from the original border, which is the current situation. However you want to wrap it, that's the situation right now.
So now the preparations on the Israeli side, on the Israeli military, is to move this buffer zone into South Lebanon, which is according to the United Nations resolutions that there will be a buffer zone between Israel and Lebanon in that area. But of course, the United Nations peacekeepers never really maintained the peace on this border. Hezbollah violated it.
They violate it on a daily basis.
They dig tunnels there. Yeah. They have outposts. You can see them. We were on the border in Israeli communities. Yeah. You see their outposts and you see Hezbollah with the binoculars and the Israelis on the other side. This is before this war began. Now there's like airstrikes and attacks on a daily basis.
Yeah, and I think there's a fundamental problem here where the world population and I think public opinion tries to normalize terrorism. Yeah. And they say, no, Yair, you misunderstood. And the Hezbollah, all they want is just peace. Let them have their country. It's nonsense. That's not true at all. Hezbollah are a terrorist organization, and the world's leadership, and this is repeatedly over the last 30 years, have tried to normalize Hezbollah. Yeah. Oh, look, if you just reach an agreement with them, everything will be fine. They're just trying to represent the Shia minority, the Sunni interest, whatever the agenda is of the week. People will say that in southern Lebanon, just let them do that. Yeah. Their resistance is because the IDF was holding on to land in southern Lebanon. It's all a lie, and we've seen it with our own eyes. Yeah. In 2006, and I think that's something worth mentioning, Israel waged a substantial war in southern Lebanon, the Second Lebanon War. 2006 was a very substantial, it was both a ground maneuver and an Air Force substantial strike where Israel suffered severe casualties fighting Hezbollah.
Yeah.
Hezbollah was dealt a blow that Hassan Nasrallah, the then and now leader of the Hezbollah organization, he says, I never knew Israel would retaliate to this degree. And it kept that extreme response, kept the peace, so to speak, with Hezbollah for over 10 years. A very substantial amount of time in the relationship with Hezbollah.
Well, they had other business to attend to.
That's true. They were busy with fighting the Arab Spring, with whatever.
Yeah.
The Syrians, ISIS, 100 different agendas.
Yeah, lots of good people.
Yeah.
And I think that what the IDF is doing now, and I think we have been successful to a degree with that, is to attack infrastructure and target the leaders specifically. So all the practical command chain of Hezbollah was severely harmed since this war started, to the fact that Nasrallah is now, why are you laughing?
I was laughing about the image we were discussing earlier, where Hassan Nasrallah looks left and right and he doesn't see anyone.
Yeah, definitely. Didn't I have a meeting with my commander at 12? Oh, sorry, it got exploded on the way.
It's like if you imagine the corridor in the executive offices, they're slowly removing the pictures of the different executives and there's no one replacing them. And all that's left at the top is Hassan Nasrallah.
and then a few rookies that climbed the ladder super fast.
No one else. And there's, Hassan, you started here yesterday. Do you want to be the VP of Rockets?
Good position.
No.
Position,
Mr. Nasrallah, I'd rather not. Because systematically, and I laugh, but the IDF has been highly effective in systematically eliminating all the heads of Hezbollah in Lebanon.
In Beirut, in Syria, in other, not just on the border, in all over the country.
Including their chief of staff, whose name is?
What, Fouad Shukar?
Fouad Shukar.
Yeah, Fouad Shukar.
Long lost brother of Tupac Shakur. I'm just kidding.
Anyway, so I don't know. This is the situation right now, but it's good and it's bad because we see that Hezbollah's attacks are less organized at the moment. And Hezbollah claims that they only attack military installations, but we've seen that they launched an attack that was allegedly supposed to hit a military installation in the Golan Heights, and it hit a soccer field, murdering 12 children. We see that Hezbollah launched an attack that hit a building in Nahariya, which is a civilian city, and they said, we meant to hit a military installation, Shraga base, And I mean, how can you miss that bad? So it looks like it's either that there is a problem with command and control in the organization.
There is. And we also at the same time know that they haven't used all their long-range and accurate missiles.
Yeah.
And there's reason for that. They've, up to this moment, made the choice of not going to full war with Israel. They don't want Israel to invade Lebanon. They strongly don't want that to happen. I don't want to say they're trying to dissuade, but at the same time, they don't want to lose face and say, okay, we give up or we surrender. And they also can't afford to do that because they, again, are the proxies of the Iranians.
Yeah, definitely.
So they're playing their cards carefully. One, trying to hurt and humiliate publicly Israel and the IDF, but at the same time, not get it to the point where Israel says, okay, we get it. Let's leave everything that we're doing. Let's be done with Gaza, recruit all the reservists, and let's invade southern Lebanon because this problem isn't going away anytime soon.
But it's not happening yet. There is no decision.
We've been on the cusp a couple times.
But still, our best battalions are stationed in the Gaza Strip. So there is, the IDF is prepared, is ready, but at the moment, the focus is still the Gaza Strip with the boots on the ground there.
Yeah, I love that you plugged in your daily news show. But to your point, the IDF today is far more mobile than it usually is.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, there's an enormous number of units that have been mobilized, and even if they're in Gaza today, they can move to Lebanon tomorrow.
No, definitely, and we've seen that personally.
And it's happened.
I mean, our units is ready with all the gear at place, all the guns already, prepared for each soldier's eye, ready to be taken from the warehouses whenever they call us to go up north.
And I think that's also something worth mentioning, is the IDF has learned from this last year. And just the other day, I was in a training, a briefing day in the Army, and you can see on every level of the Army, the tactical readiness is much higher than it used to be.
Yeah.
Entire battalions and brigades are thinking of how can I more swiftly respond to any case scenario.
Definitely.
How can we prep our gear better? How can our soldiers come quicker? And the army today, and this is important to state, even if Lebanon happens 30 days from now, 60 days from now, 90 days from now, 150 days from now, we're still going to be at a very high readiness level compared to where we were a year ago.
Well, definitely. And just now, the Chief of Staff and the IDF is stating that within minutes we can operate in Lebanon, and within 24 hours we can mobilize enough reserve units to execute this ground maneuver, which is amazing. I mean, it used to be a few days before we can mobilize the reserves from their houses into the front lines.
Yeah, and the thing that really reshapes the conversation about Hezbollah and northern Israel.
Yeah.
Where in the past the threat was they can move faster than we can. Hezbollah is closer to the border. They have, their elite forces, the Radwan force, sitting on the border.
The commandos, they're
commandos, and they'll break through the border and they'll take over Jewish communities across the border, and we won't be able to respond in time.
Definitely, yeah.
That's not the situation right now. We have the ability on an infrastructure level, on mobilization level, on an intelligence, on on everything.
Yeah.
On every level.
Communications with the ground forces.
Exactly. On every level, the IDF right now is still very, very quick to the trigger in responding to a northern threat.
Yeah.
So that threat is diminished in the sense because, and again, this needs to be explained, Hezbollah never planned to conquer Israel. That's not the goal. Their goal was to have tactical victories.
Achievements,
tactical victories for the day. Take over a community. Take a small bordering community.
They want like a
300 people
victory picture.
Exactly. They want something that they can say.
They want the Hezbollah flag in Israel.
We humiliated you. Look, we took over.
Definitely.
And in the past, that was an option. At the current state of Israel, the IDF, and the number of armed people that exist in this country right now, and trained people in this country, things have changed. There are things we can't talk about on air yet.
No, definitely.
But we can say that the readiness level in Israel, from the level of the civilian carrying a handgun, all the way up to the best of the IDF units, is far greater in number and far greater in training and far greater in quality than it was a year ago. There are countless new units, countless new quick responder units throughout this country. And I also want to say that people mistakenly think that the northern population of this country fled in fear. That's not the case.
Definitely not.
We have friends, we have people on our team who live very close to the border in northern Israel, who did not leave their communities, who stand guard on their communities on a daily basis.
Keep farm.
Yeah.
Keep the farming.
And they keep farming and they keep growing. Many of the people that were evacuated by the government.
Yeah.
They were told to leave. And many of the communities said, we're not leaving. We're staying, or they left the men behind to guard the communities. Exactly. Now many of the families have already returned. So I have to also emphasize, it's not a black and white situation. Northern Israel is full of very resilient people. They always have been. Being afraid of being shelled and having sniper fire, that's something that's been happening since the 50s.
Yeah.
That's not new. It's just the same story again and again. There are a lot of resilient people, and Hezbollah is not... The threat always was, and I think it's important, that they will surprise us. Yeah. And right now it's going to be very hard to surprise us. The surprise will be in minutes, it won't be in days.
Definitely. No, because we have eyes all over the north now. It's a different situation.
We have assets.
And people.
We have assets. Yeah. We have assets.
I want to try something, Mati. I want to ask our viewers, to ask us some questions in the comment box, and then we'll be able to answer that in the next shows. If you have topics that you want to discuss, or maybe questions about this situation, because we talk about it a lot, but it's very complex. To understand the connection between Hezbollah, between Iran, and it's basically this big picture of this region. And if you want us to answer specific questions, please write it on the comment box or go to our website. We encourage you to visit us, subscribe to our newsletter at www.tbnisrael.com/news. Okay, we create and update also articles. So if you really want to dig deeper, go to the website, subscribe, and stay in connection and in communication with us. Okay, we want this to be a community that understands the truth about Israel and unites in prayer. So,
yeah, and I want to say also personally, and I can't emphasize this enough, and if people are watching this at home, I can't understate how important it is to us to have a connection with the people that are watching this. It's been significant for us while we were in uniform in the Army. It continues to be significant today. to know that people around the world care about what's happening in this country, pray for what happens in this country, donate and communicate and think and hold dear to their hearts what's happening here. So here's a call to action to you guys. If you stuck around this long to Yair and I just chatting back and forth, take another minute, and if you haven't subscribed, subscribe. And if you haven't shared, share. And if you haven't liked, like. And if you feel like you can, make a donation, because that's what keeps the wheels going here in Israel.
Yeah, definitely. So how do we summarize what's the future, Mati, of all this? Are we taking back Israel's north anytime soon?
I don't know, but
$1 million question.
I think it's a lot more than $1 million. A lot more than $1 million.
I think $1 million is basically
$1 million per
half
day,
a day of tank hours operating or something like that.
So, I mean, there are a couple scenarios here. Let's try to break them down. And we said this also in the last podcast. Yeah. People always imagine and sort of state these conversations as it's a binary equation. It's or that we lose or that we win. That's never the case. There's 100 different shades of gray in the middle. Yeah. And those shades of gray are, we can take no action, we can take limited action, we can postpone, we can delay, we can use diplomatic pressure to maneuver, to buy us time. There's many different things that can happen. Doesn't
look like the other things will happen.
Let's go with what we know.
Okay.
What we know is that the population of northern Israel has to go back home. Mm-hmm. We know that population being displaced from their homes, again, it's tens of thousands of people that are going on a year of being evacuated forcibly by the government, or encouraged strongly.
And the
by
same
the
thing happens also in the South Lebanon.
It was voluntary there.
Yeah.
But in Israel, again, the government has sort of told people not to come back, and we're incentivizing them financially not to come back to their homes.
Yeah, we pay their salaries.
We pay their rent elsewhere.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So those people are incentivized not to go back home, and at one point or another, they have to go back home. And our government can't afford publicly. It can't afford as far as like national pride. It can't afford on the defense side of the northern part of the country.
And financially.
Not to return them home. So a given is that at one point or another, now 6 months in the future, that population has to go home. That's something we know.
Yeah.
The second thing is we can't leave things as usual with Hezbollah. We can't just go on as if everything's fine. It isn't. We're not in business as usual.
No, especially after October 7th.
Yes.
People do not believe that, now people are afraid when they see or sit next to the border that what happened with Hamas can happen with Hezbollah 10 times more.
They should be.
Definitely.
They should be. I remember, this is back in the beginning of 2006, before the Second Lebanon War. I had a friend who lived up in Manara.
Yeah.
And I remember driving up the road there. I was still in the army at the time. And I'd look across the fence and I'd see the Hezbollah soldiers. They'd wave, and it wasn't like a mocking wave. They'd wave like hi neighbor kind of wave. They were sitting across the fence. It was faster for me to get to them, like just jumping over the fence into the next police station. And they're just sitting there on the border. The same thing happened last year. We can't go back to business as usual with a terrorist organization.
Same thing in Judea and Samaria, which both of us live like really close to these communities that have also Hamas influences and operatives in them. So it's a very hard situation.
So, exactly. So there needs to be some kind of resolution.
Yeah.
And that's where it becomes just guesswork at that point. Because what is a resolution? Countless options.
Yeah.
It could be an international intervention with a treaty that is significant or not insignificant, but still enough to allow people to go back to their homes. It could be an international observer or peacekeeping force. It could We've tried it unsuccessfully so far, or successful for short amounts of time.
Definitely.
That's another way to look at it. It could be a retreat of Hezbollah forces to the Litani River or a different line on the map that says you retreat 2 miles, 3 miles, 5 miles from the border. That gives Israel a demilitarized zone on your end where we know that we're more safe now than we were before.
Yeah, that was also tried before for a while, I agree.
And again,
also, maybe bring the Lebanese military or strengthen the Lebanese military, but that's a problem because Hezbollah is controlling a big portion of the political area.
There's such a weakened population and government at this point.
So
it becomes very, very tricky. So it's like you don't really have anyone that you can, in a trustworthy fashion, negotiate with and know that it'll last for long. And at this point, I think people don't expect a negotiation with Hezbollah or the Iranians or the Houthis to be, peace in our lifetime kind of thing. It's for the next 12 months. We hope this holds, and it might not.
Exactly.
And sometimes that's what you have.
And the sad part is this is part of the big plan of Iran to create this ring of fire that everybody's talking about around Israel.
Yeah.
And they have. They have Hezbollah, they have Iranian militias in Iraq and Syria. They're smuggling weapons to Judea and Samaria through Jordan. They have the Houthis in Yemen that are becoming also a terror state and affecting the entire shipping lanes of the world. And then you have Hamas terrorists and other Palestinian terrorist groups that are willing to join in against Israel.
Yeah.
So this is,
and they're being encouraged to on a daily basis.
Yeah, and if you have even if you have a ceasefire that is temporary, you need to keep fighting these incitements. You need to keep fighting these smuggling routes of weapons. You need to keep fighting the training of new leaders, of advanced technologies that are being smuggled in. So even if we have like a kind of a quiet on the surface, the battle of intelligence and behind the scenes should always keep going.
And it will. And I'm running through the scenarios in my head.
Yeah.
All the solutions that work long term, they're not just local. They're always regional.
Yeah.
And
has to be an interest on both sides.
Exactly. What will buy Israel peace and what will bring to the Middle East and the trade routes of the Middle East and the people of the Middle East, what will buy them peace and quiet, at least for a season, is Israel coming out strong and victorious in a decisive fashion, and at the same time, also projecting regional power and relationships.
Yeah.
So and again, so that ties into the Abraham Accords. It ties into the Saudis' relationship.
Saudi Arabia, Jordan,
exactly.
Egypt.
It ties into strengthening the government of Jordan, ties into strengthening the alliance with the Egyptians that have been, it fluctuates, but they've been our peace partners for my entire lifetime and more.
Strengthening the Lebanese moderate people, or like the other side, not the Shiite supported by Iran.
You can say what you want about the Egyptians. We've had a peace agreement with them since the late 70s that has worked.
Yeah, and we talk and we communicate, even if there's like changes, like ISIS going strong in the Sinai Peninsula.
And the same goes for the Jordanians.
Yeah.
We had a terrorist attack by a Jordanian national this week in Israel. But aside from very, 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 anecdotal events, we've had 22 or 23 years of, was 92, years of peace with the Jordanians.
Just now in April, the Jordanian Air Force helped us shoot down all these rockets, missiles, drones that were launched from Iran towards Israel and Jerusalem. So
there
is hope. It's good.
No, there is hope. And the projection of power, we have an alliance with some of the oil kingdoms of the Gulf, UAE, and others. And those alliances allow us to fly over their airspace. They're an ally to us on a political level, on a trade level, on a military level. What if the Saudis become part of that picture?
Definitely.
Because the U.S. wants eventually, the U.S. is still today, and the day this, people hear this, even if it's weeks in the future, the U.S. still holds substantial assets in the Middle East.
Well, now they hold also substantial military assets in the Middle East. If you're talking about projection of power, you can see that with Americans, Brits, French,
and
soldiers
it's
here.
Expensive. Carrier fleets and strike forces and Air Force assets and all these different things that are located here. That has to end at one point, or it has to at least dial down at one point.
Or the financial benefits might need to be bigger than the costs for to keep the fleet here, to keep the soldiers here, to keep the airplanes here.
I mean, they are for the time being. Stability in the Arabian Sea, stability in Suez Canal. Those things are very important to people.
Yeah,
they're very expensive when it's unstable.
Yeah, I think, Mati, that what we like to end with in this podcast is whenever there is uncertainty, there's only one thing you can do. You can look to God.
Well, there's two things you can do.
What's the first?
You can despair,
or
you can find hope.
Okay. There's one positive.
There's one wise thing you
Definitely.
can do. The wise thing to do is to find hope, and to find hope in God. And I think, and I agree with you 100%. It all boils down to what is your disposition towards life, and how are you angling yourself, positioning yourself to the events of today and tomorrow. And if you look at things and say, oy vey, as us Jews like to say, oy vey, what will we do? I don't know what tomorrow holds. You can find despair in that. And you can say the same statement exactly. Oy vey, I don't know what tomorrow holds. And the threats are there, and the concern is there. But, and this is where it becomes positive, but I know God's faithful.
Yeah.
He's been so throughout history. And He will continue to do so in my lifetime and all the lifetimes to follow. And that's where I find hope.
Yeah, definitely. I think that, I did everything I can do in order to protect my family and my country in this situation. More than that, I need to trust God that He can do His thing. And this is what we do. And this is what I think is important for you. I mean, wherever you are, this is a spiritual war. Okay? Iran, all these proxies that are attacking Israel do it only because of a spiritual reason. Because there is no oil in Israel, there is no gold that I know of yet.
Just the people.
Just the people. So they want to destroy us because we are representing the connection and the promise that God gave Abraham. And if God is faithful to our people, to the people of Israel, for all these years, throughout all these wars, against all these odds, then He's faithful to you. So the enemy wants 100%. To destroy this connection. So please join us in prayer. And this is what we try to do here at TBN Israel. We want to share the truth of what is happening and encourage people to pray for the situation that God will intervene.
Yeah, it works.
Yeah, it works definitely.
I think this is a good place to end. We'll say thank you to everyone at home that's stuck with us so far. If you've stuck around so far, good for you. It's been a long conversation today. But I think we have a lot of reasons to find hope and a lot of reasons to care about what happens here. Yair, thank you as always.
Thank you. And
always
please
fun.
Subscribe, share, and tell your people. And most importantly, pray for the peace of Jerusalem.
Hello, this is Mati here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online at tbn.org/Israel. Thank you.